All right, this is Unit 1, Day 2, MDE 54, and we're now on page 4 of the notes. So going down to simplifying fractions and then converting fractions to decimal, and then finishing up with a couple practice problems. So going back and forth here. So what a fraction is it's a quotient of two numbers. It's one number divided by another. The top one is your numerator. The bottom one is your denominator. The only rule is the bottom number can't be 0 because you can't divide by 0. It's undefined. And that's this first box. The second box says, though, when you have a fraction like AB equals AB, if you want to multiply by some factor, as long as you do it top and bottom, it cancels it out, and you can do that. So if I have 2/3, by multiplying by 3/3, I still have an equivalent fraction, 6/9, which still reduces back to 2/3. So an equivalent expression has that same value as the original expression, and that's one of my fundamental principles of fractions. And then moving to this third box, if I want to reduce fractions or write them in lowest terms, I want to take out that common one. So if I did have that 6/9, well, 6 is 2 times 3, and 9 is 3 times 3. So I can divide out the 3's and reduce it down to 2/3. And you keep going until the top and the bottom, numerator and denominator, don't have any factors in common except for 1. So if I had 90 over 100, I would take out the 10, and you can do it multiple times if you find they have more in common. So that would be my 9/10. So if you want kind of a trick of when to know a fraction is simplified, if you can get it to all primes and none of the primes match, you know that you've simplified it. So for example, that 9/10, if I'm looking at it and I'm wondering, well, 9 is 3 times 3, which are prime. 10 is 2 times 5, which are prime, and they don't match. So I'm definitely simplified. Okay. So it's when there are just no more factors except for 1. So if I'm doing 15/90ths, what I might look at over here is saying 15 is 3 times 5. Okay. And I might write it as all of its primes. 90, I'm going to do 9 times 10, and then 3 times 3, 2 times 5. These are called factor trees. So my 90 was 3 times 3 times 2 times 5. So that means that they have in common a 3, and they have in common a 5. Now, this doesn't fully cancel. There's still a 1 on top. So if all of them are in common, put that 1 there. So that's 1 over 3 times 2, which is 1/6. Now, if you already said, well, I knew that 15 was 15 times 1 because 90 is 15 times 6, I wanted to do it that way. That's fine too. But if you want to do the factor trees, you can do that. So where it might make sense too is with these big ones. With a factor tree, you can pick any 2 factors that you know go into it. So this ends at 5. So I'm gonna put a 5. And I'm going to do the division and see that that's 33. 5 is prime, so I'm going to keep going with 3 and 11. So 210, same deal. I'm going to just divide it by any 2 numbers I can think of. It ends in a 0, so I'm going to pull out 10 and 21. Well, 21 is 3 times 7. Those are prime. 10 is 2 times 5, which is prime. So now I'm going to rewrite 165 as 5 times 3 times 11. And I'm going to rewrite the 210 as the bottom, the ones that you stopped at, the branches, times 2 times 5. So I get to cancel out one of the 5's. And I get to cancel out one of the 3's. And I'm left with 11 over 14 because 7 times 2 is 14. And I know that it's completely reduced. So over here, if you do your factor tree, 56 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 7. 135 is 3 times 3 times 3 times 5. They have nothing in common. So this was already reduced. So that's just a great way to look at it and think, how do I know if it's reduced or not? We'll do the factors. If nothing matches, it's already reduced. So then going on to page 5 of day 2, if I want to convert fraction to decimal. So if I look at a decimal, 0.657, going one decimal place is called a tenth. Going two decimal places is called a hundredth, meaning you're 1 out of 100. And going 3 is called a thousandth, 1 out of 1,000. So I can put this 657, and I know this isn't the answer, I'm just showing you the fraction, over 1,000 because it's to the thousandth place. Okay. So the point of that being, if you're asked to round to the thousandths, you're being asked to round to 3 decimals. If you're being asked to round to the 10,000th, it's 4. The hundredths is 2. The tenths is 1. So we want to make sure we know where we're rounding so that when our questions ask round to the nearest hundredth, round to the nearest tenth, we know where we're rounding to. So if I'm being asked to round to the nearest hundredth is 2. So I'm going to look at just the number beyond this 7. 5 and up, round up, 0 to 4, round down. So that 7 would round it to 6. And hundredth is 2 decimal places. If I want to round to the nearest tenth, that's 1 decimal. The 8 rounds it up. So in that special case, that's actually rounds to 46.0 because 9 rounds to 9 being rounded up is 10. And you would put the 0 if you are being asked for it. Now down here, nearest cent, think money, that's to 2 decimals. It's the same as this one. I'm asking for 2 decimals. So the 6 would round up the 5. And the 8 would round up the 1. And with money, we're always going to pretty much go to 2 unless you're specifically told something else. Now, quarter, think of quarters. Quarters are 0.25, 0.5, 0.75. The nearest quarter means what you're closest to. You're essentially at 0.79, which is much closer to 7.5 than 4.0. It's several away from that. It's a lot closer. So you would round that to 3.75. So just round what you're, watch what you're being asked to round to, hundredth, or tenth, quarter, whatnot. Right, then my last 2 for this video are converting decimal to fraction and fraction to decimal. So as I mentioned, if you've got 2 decimal places, that's 100th. If you've got 3, that's 1,000th. So it's the number of zeros on the bottom correlate to how many decimal places you had. So the 2 would just stay in front. But if I have 1/8, I had to move it 1, 2, 1, 2 zeros on the bottom. This 952, I had to move it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to have 4 zeros on the bottom. Now you should absolutely reduce these. These are not in simplified form. So practicing your reductions, this one would be 109 out of 50. This one would be 119 out of 125, divided both by 4. And this one takes a little bit of effort. Start by just dividing by 2, and then see if some other common factors might go into it. All right, last lesson for day 2. If you now want to convert fraction to decimal, if you have it over things like 10, 100, 1,000, or 100, you can do it with moving decimals. Anything else you're really going to be putting in the calculator. So we're dividing the numerator and denominator by 100, so the number becomes smaller. Dividing by 10, the number becomes smaller. How much smaller is the number of zeros? So that's 1 decimal place. This would be 2 decimal places. And you are becoming smaller because you're dividing. If you're not sure, you can absolutely do these in the calculator too. This one is 3. So 1, 2, 3. And this one is 2. So 36.92. And then this item, please check your modules. These learning skills count for 20% of your grade, and they're going to be done different ways in your modules. So stay tuned for that.